Welcome back to our second week of Not Okay, where we're trying to tackle a puzzle of what to do with anxiety and stress. And one of the biggest ways I think people your age tend to deal with stress and anxiety is how to navigate feelings of rejection. It's a normal part of life, but it's like your brain has developed a new filter that makes you process everything you're confronted with through the lens of this question. What if they reject me? Whoever they is. And it may not even be a conscious thing for you. If I fail the test, will my parents reject me? What about my teacher? What if I don't like what my friends like? Will they reject me? What if they don't like what I like? What will they think then? What if they reject my application? What if they reject my idea? What if they reject my work, my creative project? What if they reject what I believe or what I don't believe? What if they reject me? No one likes to go through life feeling rejected. No one likes being let down or having their hopes slashed. However, we can't let this fear of no keep us from living. But just because rejection is a normal part of life doesn't mean we should not think about it. Rejection hurts. So how can we learn to deal with it? Well, there's a story in Mark chapter 6 where the disciples experienced rejection on a pretty intense level. Check this out. Calling the 12 to him, he began to send them out 2 by 2 and gave them authority over impure spirits. These were his instructions. Take nothing for the journey except a staff. No bread, no bag, no money in your belts. Wear sandals, but not an extra shirt. Whenever you enter a house, stay there until you leave that town. And if any place will not welcome you or listen to you, leave that place and shake the dust off your feet as a testimony against them. They went out and preached that people should repent. Mark 6, 7-12. Jesus sends his disciples on a mission to pray for healing for others and invite people to the good news that Jesus is telling everybody about. He gave them specific instructions about what to get and where to stay once they reach their destination. Jesus expects that when we tell people about the good news he is bringing into the world, people will reject the truth. And when this happens, he tells the disciples to shake the dust off their feet and use it as a testimony. Now, this is a little strange, so let me explain. In this culture and time in history, hospitality was significant. It was expected that people would take care of strangers and travelers because every life is valuable. And when people ignore a stranger or a visitor in their town, it leaves them exposed and endangered. When a town rejected the disciples, it meant that they didn't want to take care of people. So if the disciples were rejected, Jesus commanded them to shake the dust off their feet, acknowledging that this town wasn't welcoming. By not being welcoming, they were choosing to show that they were hostile to the good news of Jesus. Culturally, shaking the dust off meant that people within this city were responsible for whatever God did next. Now, just to be clear, this isn't a call to hate people or to write them off. This action has a specific purpose, and the disciples, like all followers of Jesus, are called to love others. When we share the good news of who Jesus is, some people will inevitably reject us. Even though all the rejection hurts, the disciples show us that when we have a secure base and an anchor of belonging, we can face that rejection. When we sense the unconditional love of Jesus who sends us on a mission, we can let go of that rejection that life will inevitably throw our way because we belong to the one who matters most. To experience Jesus as our place of safety, we need to acknowledge that in the normal ups and downs of life, we sometimes build walls to protect us from rejection. Now, fearing rejection can feel like a tiger is chasing us, and it can activate our fight or flight response. And this leads to strategies of protection over strategies of connection. And all this means is that when we experience emotions like shame, guilt, and anxiety, they keep us from being able to address our emotional needs because we are stuck in survival mode, right? So we begin to hide who we are from others in order to self-protect. This is like putting up a barricade of defenses to avoid pain. Physically, our nervous system's number one job is to protect us from danger. So if we've been hurt, betrayed, or rejected, maybe by a friend or someone close to us, our system works hard to prevent that from ever happening again. That starts to build up a wall, and these walls are meant to keep us from feeling more pain. But they do so by putting a barrier between us and people. Unfortunately, if someone were to offer us a compliment or is generally kind to us, our walls can block that out. So yes, the wall is protecting us, but it also keeps us from experiencing love, connection, and the gifts of being in relationship with people. We can't just tell ourselves not to build walls. Our brains and bodies want us to be safe, and sometimes they create these walls without us even thinking about it. We can't just live behind our defense mechanisms. A defense mechanism or a coping strategy delays our progress, and it might even keep us from experiencing the connection that we long for. We need to break down these walls and replace them with something that will help us for the long haul. In the story of the disciples, they were sent out, which means they returned to Jesus as their home base. In a similar instance of this story, we see the disciples talk about moments of rejection and failure with Jesus in private. This is core to learning how to undo and combat our defense mechanisms. We need to know how to process what has happened or is happening with people who are safe to us and won't reject us. We need to reflect. When we sense that walls of rejection are creeping up, trying to both protect us and isolate us. There was a prayer that both Jesus and the disciples would have been very familiar with. And Jesus quotes this to them in the book of Luke when he is about to send them on a similar mission to the one we just read about. It says, "Whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust." When you feel rejected and start building up walls around you to keep you safe, take a moment and say a prayer like this. This is going to help release rejection and the need to build up walls, because God is the only fortress you need. Inevitably, we will experience rejection at some point in our lives. And this psalm helps us see that we can always turn to God as a safe refuge from rejection. God will never reject us or leave us when others do. God will always embrace us. We see in the story of the disciples and in this psalm that God is our security. For the disciples, Jesus was a secure base from where they could be sent out to the world to share the good news of what he was doing. He was their foundation where they could return, receive love and encouragement and protection after shaking off their rejection. Imagine Jesus as our secure base and refuge. His love helps us go out and take risks, process the rejections we face, and then return to be restored and renewed. We can go out and return as we need because we know that Jesus holds us and keeps us safe, despite our feelings and experiences of rejection. He never rejects us because when people reject you, Jesus never will. Now, when I was your age, I remember having fears of being rejected all the time. And even though at the time I didn't really recognize what I was doing, I did, looking back now in hindsight, I can see I was protecting myself in a number of ways. When I was afraid that people would think I'm a crybaby or would think that I was not a man enough, or that I was afraid they would think I'm wimpy, or that I couldn't take the pressure, or I all those kinds of things. I always wanted to be accepted by those around me, and I learned from an early age that I need to put on a tough face, that nothing phases me, and if I am hurt or offended, I make a joke about it. Right? I used humor in a lot of ways as a defense mechanism, as a wall to deflect what I was actually feeling. And that catches up with you in life. So whether you're embarrassed about something or something happens, something as simple as tripping in the cafeteria on your way to throw your trash away and then like the whole table sees you, right? Just laughing about it or that can be healthy, but make sure you're not building up walls or projecting your identity on how other people feel about you. You're worth so much more than that, and you have a bigger mission than that. So there are a few simple things that you can start to do this week that can help you break down your walls and know that Jesus never rejects you. One is to rest in Jesus. The next time you're worried or stressed, intentionally think about and trust that He is a place of rest from the rejection that we often experience. Secondly, run to Jesus. When you sense that you are retreating behind your walls, consider responding to how Jesus called the disciples to respond. Take a moment and return to be with Him as a refuge, to be restored and renewed for the journey ahead. And lastly, set good boundaries. If you find yourself in relationships where you are frequently rejected, it is okay to set a boundary around that relationship. Jesus asked the disciples to do something similar when He said to shake the dust off their feet. while we are allowing Jesus to break down the defense mechanisms that come with rejection, that doesn't mean we shouldn't ignore the source of rejection. If you have relationships where you are regularly rejected, it is healthy to set a boundary. Right? We all have experienced rejection. It can be painful. It can feel so lonely. So in addition to going to God in the moments of rejection, it is crucial to have a community of people around you to help you process the pain that you experience. Isolation is disastrous to our mental health, and God knows it. He sent the disciples out in pairs of two. Right? Psalm 91, the poet calls God a fortress. When was the last time you saw a fortress built around you? It may be a bit of a puzzle to put together, but God longs for you to have a crew of people who offer you the belonging that Jesus desires you to have. You're going to get in your groups here in a second, and when you do, I want you to take the handout at the front of the stage with a pen and complete that. Then you're going to talk through it and talk about it, process it as a group, and you're going to continue your group discussion. Here at Victory, we want you to know that this is a safe place that you belong. A place that isn't perfect, doesn't always get it right, but is trying each week to be a place you can trust and depend on, where you can have people that you can count on to encourage you and build you up. And hopefully, as a part of this community, you get to be part of that hope for those around you as well. Jesus longs for you to have a crew of friends and trusted adults who show you that you are loved and you belong. God longs for you, and you deserve to experience this reality in full. When people reject you, Jesus never will. Love you guys. See you next week.